Calls for justice ring through Denver streets for a second day. It is the second night where things could get dicey. The mayor joins us live to talk about what they're expecting and whether the city is part of the solution to police brutality or part of the problem. RTD shuts down transit downtown but insists they're not trying to keep protesters at home. We'll go inside how these protests work and how describing them as either peaceful or violent is not as simple as it sounds. And a college student from Colorado got a summer job, added a great idea, and might just start a national movement. All that is next. The name George Floyd is being heard in Denver tonight and across America. Calm protests have circled city streets for 6 hours now and are expected to last into the night. It was last night when things got dicey downtown, with people throwing rocks at police and police responding with chemical rounds at protesters. Protesters today are again calling for an end to police brutality that ends the lives of Black Americans like George Floyd, who died after he was pinned to the street in Minneapolis by the knee of a white police officer. That officer was charged with murder today. Last night's protest was scattered by shots fired near the state capitol. Elected officials in the crowd said that the shooter was not one of theirs. Police still have not found that person today. Scattered groups around the city last night blocked I-25, they vandalized the state capitol, and they took over various intersections before they were cleared away by pepper balls and tear gas from police. Denver's police chief defended how the police responded last night, as did the mayor, who will join me in a moment. Denver police are preparing for another tense night. It's obvious by the fencing that they are putting up around police headquarters. Last night in Minneapolis, rioters burned a police precinct while people set off fireworks nearby in celebration. Let's talk about why protesters are filling the streets. Denver itself has a history of police brutality. But why now has this case out of Minnesota at this moment moved so many Americans to action? You've seen Elizabeth Epps, a progressive justice reform advocate, on Next over the years. She's been out in the streets this week.
We're out there for George Floyd, but we're out there for so many other folks, names that we already know and names that we don't know yet. And why we're out, it's a direct response to the systemic state violence. And to be out and knowing that crowd control is itself a public health disaster, a public health crisis that's being perpetrated against us, it's worth that risk when we see that, in fact, if you look like me or like you or too many of our neighbors, you're not safer at home.
RTD has decided to shut down bus and rail service in and out of downtown indefinitely due to the protests. RTD leadership tells me they're not trying to interfere with people coming in to protest peacefully. They say this is about the safety of their employees. RTD suspended bus service to the big station right across from the Capitol last night on the advice of Denver police, who are facing off with protesters there. Today's indefinite transit shutdown was not requested by the police or by the city. It was RTD's call. The chairwoman of the board explained.
They can take public transit, it's just not going to drop them off at Union Station or Pacific Center, so they would walk in. But it really, if you saw the newscast, and I'm sure you did, I was watching you last night, there'd be no way to navigate a bus through all of the people that were out there and the police, and it would have been a real hindrance for the safety of everybody.
RTD's Assistant General Manager, Pauletta Tanilis, told me today that they would consider restarting service to downtown Denver if they were asked to do that by Denver police or the mayor. So let's now go inside how these protests work. I think too often on the news we say that it's either a peaceful protest or it's a violent protest. That often overlooks what's happening just beneath the surface of a protest. Our Marshall Zellinger is back with us from outside the state capitol, where he was sent scrambling to avoid tear gas last night. And Marshall, yeah. I saw this in the protest at the Democratic National Convention in Denver more than a decade ago. You saw it last night. You'll have some people in the crowd looking for trouble, blending in with a larger group that just wants to be heard.
Normally, it's easy to decipher between the two because of the masks. When we're not all wearing masks, you can kind of tell who doesn't want to be identified in a protest and who wants to peacefully protest, and you don't care if you see your face or not. The protesters here And right now, it could be a mix for all I know, but this is peaceful here right now. Nothing's going on with any conflict with police. They're back from the 16th Street Mall. They're back here on the West Steps. The graffiti here at the Capitol, the broken windows, that was cleaned up overnight, but in the last 20 minutes, the Civil War monument here on the west side, that's been graffitied with spray paint. It started with chalk, then it went to spray paint. The people who did it posed for photos. Above them, on the second floor balcony, Colorado State Patrol troopers are watching from up there, and they are the brunt of some of the chanting down here. I just want to show you some video from earlier when the protest started again at noon today. Again, no conflicts at the start of it. There was the chanting here on the West Steps. They progressed down to the street level, blocking some of the streets as they went around the Capitol, and then progressed to 16th Street and back. That's happened a couple of times. Earlier, I spoke with State Representative Leslie Herod, who was here on the west side when the protest started this time yesterday, when there were shots fired, and we talked about trying to have a peaceful protest that's infiltrated by people who want to do wrong.
There were a lot of peaceful protesters who were out yesterday who were expressing their frustration about law enforcement abuse. But there were also some folks who joined in who were not peaceful. I will say that the people who I talked to who were organizing the protest had every intent for a peaceful rally. And folks just used that as an excuse to create more violence and discord among our community, and that shouldn't be tolerated.
Unfortunately, we don't have a specific group that showed up that we could tie this to. There were folks that really caused significant disruptions, and we don't know the reason or the manner behind it.
So the reason or the manner behind it makes me wonder, why not say who? A small group of individuals is what was said earlier today by Chief Paul Pazin. And Kyle, there's perhaps the Antifa movement, definitely the anarchists that blend in at some point with the protesters, that it's the people 12 rows deep that throw something at the police that cause problems for the people who are standing peacefully in the front.
Marshall, I think when you go to a couple of these, you can get a read from the posture of the protest participants and then the posture of the law enforcement in terms of who's ready to do what and how soon. What do things look like down there right now in terms of the posture?
I mean, it's the Colorado State Patrol right now that are keeping an eye on what's going on here. I don't see Denver police around as I look around Colfax and Lincoln. What happens, what we saw last night at 14th and Sherman, is when they meet a line, like at a crosswalk, where police draw a line across the intersection and then the protesters come up to them and they're quiet. And in some cases, some people will say something, but it's that action from farther back that's probably somebody who is just there to cause problems that creates that tension that the people up front feel the brunt of first. But here right now, it just seems to be the protesters chanting at the State Patrol troopers that are not doing anything to change the posture.
Marshall Zellinger, appreciate your work last night and today. Be safe. Denver Mayor Michael Hancock says that the city stands with and supports peaceful protesters. And he vigorously defended how Denver police used non-lethal force like pepper balls and tear gas to handle last night's protest. Mayor Hancock joins me now live. Mayor, thank you for your time.
As always, Kyle, glad to be with you.
I know that you don't want to see violence in the streets again tonight, but is Denver prepared for it?
Yes, we're prepared for it. Our officers are on the perimeter, and we'll only engage if necessary to protect life and property.
Why do you think that the death of George Floyd at this particular moment in America has moved so many people to action when so many other deaths haven't?
Yeah, I think, Kyle, quite frankly, this video was so vivid and so real. We could hear his voice. We could hear him calling for breath, pleading for the officers to acknowledge the fact that he could not breathe painfully. And one thing I'll never forget is to hear him calling for his mom, and to hear the bystanders witnesses who were there saying he cannot breathe, get up off of him, pleading for the officers to show some compassion for George. I think the vividness of his murder will resonate with us for a very long time. And it brought back all the memories and the thinking and all the passions behind Eric Gardner and Ahmaud Marbury and Trayvon Martin. These are real emotions that, quite frankly, in many places in the United States have not been addressed.
You offered solidarity with the protesters today, saying that you support their calls for justice. You also must know, though, that one of the things that the protesters are protesting is your administration, your decisions. Some of them don't see you as an ally, they see you as the enemy.
Well, I don't know what that means, Kyle, but let me tell you, I'm a 50-year-old man, and I've grown up as an African American. I understand what it means to be, in this position and to feel the passion of watching our brothers and sisters struggle and just to try to get by, and to have an innate fear of police and concern for their safety when they ought not to be concerned for their safety around police officers. I have sat at the table and tried to negotiate opportunities and relationships. I have run civil rights organizations and stood in the gap for our community. With that said, what I will continue to be focused on is how we bring those who stand for justice and are sworn to serve and protect, and those who expect and demand accountability and respect and fair treatment in our communities together. And I think that's the greatest platform and bully pulpit that I have as the mayor, and to make sure that there's fair treatment.
You were asked a striking question earlier today. In our bit of time remaining, I want to return to it here. You very quickly described the death of George Floyd as a murder, but you do not use that term when Denver police officers or sheriff's deputies kill someone, even when it's later determined that they acted inappropriately. So I'll ask you here, was Marvin Booker murdered? Michael Marshall, was he murdered? Was Jesse Hernandez murdered at the hands of Denver officers?
Those individuals were, yes, murdered by police officers. I came in under different times, different training protocols, different levels of accountability with our law enforcement. It was the Booker case, it was the Marshall case, Hernandez case, that led me, along with many members of this community, to begin to effectuate change and the institution of policy and the retraining of our officers. And if you look back to 2015, you see our officers have gone through a policy change developed in collaboration with the community in terms of excessive force and how we handle it and the expectations of accountability, but also how we expect to act in terms of de-escalating situations, including not firing the cars and making sure that we do sight and distance and opportunity to do things other than to go hands-on or to use lethal response. So I got to tell you that today the city of Denver has a much stronger and much deeper policy because of, unfortunately, the deaths of those individuals in our communities while interacting with police officers.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for your time. I know that we were both hoping for a peaceful night tonight. Thank you again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kyle.
State legislators used a secret passageway to get out of the Capitol during the protest. It was used decades ago in a notorious incident. And insurance will cover cars damaged in the protest, but probably not if it's because the driver did this. America watched that video from Denver last night. We know more about it this evening. That's next. State legislators were hustled out of the Capitol through a series of underground tunnels last night during the protest, soon after shots were fired outside. These tunnels, they stretch hundreds of yards from the Capitol underneath the streets. They were originally built to bring coal in to heat the building. You may know those same tunnels were used to get KKK members away from the Capitol when they were confronted by counter-protesters back in 1992. Last night, Democratic Senate President Leroy Garcia and others were told by the troopers to head for the tunnels.
A person like myself who works and operates in this building, like so many of you, every single day, and are accustomed to seeing peaceful demonstrations, having to leave in that fashion was a little different. But I want to come back to, if we don't address the reasons why this is happening, then we're failing at a bigger systemic way.
Senator Garcia's truck and a CSP cruiser parked next to it outside the Capitol were both trashed by protesters yesterday. Garcia says, you know what? What's more important is restoring trust in law enforcement. Garcia's truck, that's covered by insurance, you know, if he's got comprehensive. Now, on the other hand, if your vehicle is damaged because you use it to intentionally hit someone, like a protester, that's not covered. Investigators are still sorting out whether that's what happened during last night's protest when a driver caught on video appeared to swerve to hit a protester who was first seen on top of the car. The video of the incident doesn't show whether the person got up on the car to avoid being run over or jumped on it intentionally. Denver Police Chief Paul Pazin says they're trying to identify the protester who was hit, asking for the public's help with that.
A Coloradan's great idea has the attention of a national company, one that's doing a lot of business these days. It's an idea that could do a lot of good. We could use more good. Next.
College students home making money over summer break came up with an idea that's so good, it might go national. Your good news today comes to us through the lens of our photojournalist Corky Scholl, who learned how those college students plan to spend their Saturday.
On Saturday, May 30th, 40-plus community DoorDash drivers will come together and donate all earnings to Denver COVID relief and 3 other worthwhile causes. So I was in Orange County in college, and like many other people, I was sent home due to the outbreak. So when I was sent home and forced to continue education remotely, there weren't many options for a job, but DoorDash, they were looking for drivers. So once I started driving DoorDash and got many of my friends into it, we all had a lot of fun doing it.
All right, we just got a huge order here, bringing it up to the doorstep.
And I'm gonna set the food down and knock on their door,
so they can have a yummy dinner.
But at the end of the day, we really felt very fortunate to have a job in a time when so many people are unfortunately out of a job and out of work. So we knew we wanted to do something for the community, which is how I came up with the idea of the Dash-a-thon.
We're having a great night so far during the practice Dash-a-thon.
What's up? We're out here, super excited for the Dash-a-thon.
Can't wait for Dash-a-thon 2020.
So the Dash-a-thon is an event taking place May 30th, where many of my friends of friends, and community members, we have over 40 drivers right now, will come together and drive DoorDash for 4 hours, and all of our earnings will go to charity that night. This really is starting to turn into something bigger than just Denver and bigger than just this one night, and it can definitely grow on a larger scale and make an even larger impact.
Love it. So this has been a week, huh? The pandemic, the economic stress, the heartbreak and the tension of those protests in Denver. Here's the deal. There are a good number of people who watch this television show, and we could make a real impact for the better if every one of us, myself included, does something for somebody this weekend that they will then go out and describe as their own good news. Any kind of unexpected kindness. Offer to cut your neighbor's grass. Grab groceries for somebody who doesn't feel comfortable going to the store right now. Maybe just make a phone call to somebody who wouldn't expect it. Now imagine if more than 100,000 of those pieces of good news happened this weekend in Colorado. That would make an impact. One person at a time. You get the final word on the protests and justice next. Liz writes in tonight to say thank you for holding the mayor accountable and admitting his police officers have committed murders. That is certainly a different answer than the one he gave this morning, Liz. Michael writes, you were all excited over a big news story to create more hype, aren't you? Your bias and idiocy are on full display. Michael, I don't think anybody is excited to see protests and even less excited about the events that have precipitated them. People just want folks to stop dying. See you next time.